Well, we got another exciting episode today. Joining me as always is Russell. Russell, how you doing over there, bud?
I'm doing great.
Doing great over there. I see you're sporting your Iron Maiden shirt.
I am indeed.
Have you listened to them today?
Of course.
Good man. Good man. Well,
Dance of Death.
Guess this movie's been on our radio for a while, right?
It has indeed.
It has indeed. And it's probably one of the most, would you say, one of the most iconic British movie franchises of all time, would you say?
If not the big one, I guess I'd have to argue.
I would argue with that as well. This movie gets really thrown under the radar, and we'll dive into as to why and our thoughts, of course, on that. But before we get into that, do you remember the first time you watched James Bond? What was the movie? What were your thoughts on it?
I'm not sure if I remember which one it was, but I know as a kid, of course, my parents were big fans of the Connery era.
Yeah.
So that would have been when they were teenagers, probably.
Mm-hmm.
So they put me onto those. It would have been Dr. No or Goldfinger, one of the really standard ones.
Yeah.
And I remember we had Diamonds Are Forever, which I wish had not been the case. But you can't change it now.
You still hate that movie, even after we watched it a couple of weeks ago.
We might get into that.
Your thoughts? Well, I guess we'll have to wait for a future episode, maybe.
I mean, at the end of this, I think we should get into a little bit of that. Because it's the movie that comes after tonight's feature.
Mm-hmm. So that should give you a pretty good clue here that our movie tonight is Our Majesty's Secret Service.
It is indeed 1969 with George Lazenby stepping in for Sean Connery on this one.
One and only film, too, which is kind of a knock of why this movie gets pushed aside since Lazenby. This was his only Bond appearance. That was it.
It was. This one is outstanding in several different ways. I sort of think of this as being the original Misfit sequel. I can't think of any other that's from an older time that bears all the marks.
We might have to dig into that later on, for sure.
Anyway.
Because I'm sure we can probably pull up some franchises maybe that we can probably find.
I guess there might be a Thin Man movie that's less regarded.
Could be.
But this one just has all the signs of being a Misfit sequel in that it has a different actor, the storyline goes in a different direction than most people expected, and in its own time it really got knocked down, like you said, and over time I think people have been willing to give it a second look, which we're going to do tonight.
Yeah, we will. It certainly has fallen under the, I wouldn't quite go the Citizen Kane effect, but something where over time the movie is kind of valued as, not bad. Not bad, but during its time, I wonder, everyone just kind of watched Sean Connery for all those years, and all of a sudden, this guy from Australia just gets thrown into the Bond film, which there was already an uproar about that, and then before you know, we get this movie is really different in a lot of ways compared to the previous Bond films. And I did write a very interesting note about this movie that I will reveal later on that I had not noticed the previous 4 or 5 times I've watched this movie before. It just kind of dawned on me, I'm like, oh my god, they haven't done this at all throughout this whole movie that we're used to seeing with James Bond. So I think it's one of those movies that you watch over and over again and you kind of get a better appreciation of it.
Yeah, so I guess the first of the many elephants we need to discuss is George Lazenby himself.
Oh, Mr. Lazenby. Question for you. Can you name any other movie George Lazenby's been in?
I can, actually.
Okay.
He was in one of my very favorite movies. He's in Gettysburg. He has a very brief part where he plays like I can't remember if he's a lieutenant colonel or something, but he shows up and he has like a goatee, and you would never know it was him till you read the credits.
Because I literally just, last night I was just thinking about it, and I'm like, I cannot think of another movie Lazenby has been in. Not one movie.
He is around. I mean, he still does stuff, but he'll never get out of this shadow, unfortunately. And I think he kind of realized that at some point when it was already too late.
Mm-hmm.
But I would like the record to show that this guy was Australian, first of all, which is just kooky. I mean, it was unlikely enough when they wanted Connery and he was Scottish, and there was an uproar about that.
Mm-hmm.
So they get an Australian guy with zero acting experience. He's done a couple of commercials. He's been a model, and I guess he just convinced producers, number one, I have the face for it, and they took it from there.
Yeah, and it's a lengthy movie too. It's about 2.5 hours, pretty lengthy for a Bond film of its time. And I'll let you start in this. What'd you think of the opening kind of 5 minutes of it?
I liked it. It kind of established a tradition we saw repeated with GoldenEye, and I can't remember if they did it with the Dalton movies or not, but of really savoring the suspense of what the new guy looks like, which is perhaps a cheap sleight of hand, but I like it because the audience knows what they're in for. You may as well string out that suspense. There's something that is brought up in our opening scene that I felt like never quite got the payoff, which is, why is Tracy trying to kill herself?
Yeah, we don't really know that too. I wrote that down in my notes too. Why isn't Tracy played by Diana Rigg, who's I guess you could say the Bond girl in this film?
Sure.
You know, she goes out. You know, she passes Bond with her Mustang, and she drives along. And of course, Bond meets up with her. You know, her car's parked by this beach, and she's got like this dress on, and she kind of looks distraught. And all of a sudden, she kind of just jumps in the water, and then tries to kill herself. Presumably that's what the movie's like. I also found it interesting, like, who are those two guys? Like, where did they come from? What did they want? We never got any clarity about that. It was just kind of like, okay, you guys, you bring a gun, you bring a knife, you find the girl and you do whatever you need to do. Was it, you know, were they like operatives of her dad who wanted her home? Like, we never really get that.
You know, I didn't think about that whatsoever, but you're right. What are those guys?
Yeah, who were those guys? You never see them again throughout the whole movie.
Because one of them gets put under a canoe and presumably is dead.
I thought the guy
canoed to death.
He gets canoed to death. The other guy gets hit with an anchor, gets drowned, and somebody keeps popping up. You're like, yeah, who the hell were those guys?
I don't know, but they died well.
Yeah, and then she just kind of snapped out of it, and she just kind of drove away. And throughout the whole movie, she doesn't have those tendencies whatsoever trying to kill herself. She seems like a spoiled little brat, you know, kind of happy with her life, you know, goes to the casino, does this, has plenty of money. So what the hell was she trying to do? What was she trying for? Maybe she just wanted to go for a swim. Maybe she just really wanted to swim with her dress on.
Could be.
Is that something women do? Because I have no idea.
Could be it was all a ruse, you think?
It could be. I don't know. It's interesting. But I wrote that down too. I'm like, what the fuck? What's the point of that? But I do like the quote in the first 5 minutes after it's over. Well, this never happened to the other fellows. So, you know, I guess one of the things with Bond that I've always wondered is there any continuation? Is Bond just one guy, or is he several people just filling into that 007 role? And I think this movie kind of opened the door for that idea to be played around in the future, because you have two references to Bond being married. You have License to Kill, where Felix is getting married, and you know, somebody, I can't remember how the quotes go, but, you know, somebody asked him, you know, what's wrong with him, James Bond, and Felix is like, he was married once, but that was a long time ago. And then there was the Spy Who Loved Me.
It was a long time ago, but he was the same age he is now.
Yeah, exactly, right?
Interesting.
What's a long time ago, Felix? Like 6 months, 1 year?
So this movie really gives you both answers, I notice, because the opening line, this never happened to the other fella.
Mm-hmm.
But then when he cleans out his desk, he gets out all the items from the previous movies, as if he's the same guy.
I also wrote that down, different gadgets, but they also had the theme songs from all those movies too. So different gadgets, but could he still be the same man? I had a hard time wondering what that's all about. So, you know, I think this movie kind of opened the doors for that discussion to be out. You know.
It's probably where it began, I guess I would have to say. Unless it was the Casino Royale comedy version.
I think that one kind of gets just put away from that.
We'll revisit that in another episode.
I certainly hope so. So yeah, the first 5 minutes, it was captivating. You know, the typical Bond, James Bond, kind of like 5-minute openings. You know, you had your fight scenes, you have kind of the suspense, and then you got that clever little witty line by Bond. Then, you know, we get into your typical theme music, kind of like opening credits, showboat, and, you know, I think it's one of the very few Bond films that doesn't have, like, an actual artist performing.
No, and in fact, one of the earliest notes I wrote while we were watching the movie was simply, awesome music.
I agree. I think the instrumental music is really awesome. I think it's awesome. I think it's great. I mean, I had no problem with it either. It was kind of refreshing.
I almost wish more often they had just gone for an instrumental tune for the opening, but I guess that's another way they broke the tradition with this one, and then quickly backpedaled in the ensuing sequels.
Yeah,
and it's hard to figure out why.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things they kept, and they also threw out too. So it was kind of an experimental film, but
yeah, I guess that's the word for it.
I guess that is. You know, this was directed by Peter Hunt, and I learned that it was his first film ever directed, which is kind of weird. Usually, first-time directors don't get these type of films, but I guess they're just like, hey.
No, they had a lot of faith in him, and to be honest, I don't know what else he did afterwards.
I don't know either. It's just the George Lazenby effect.
Once again, Peter went the way of George.
Mm-hmm.
But I would have to say, very impressive work from a first-timer.
Can I also say something else about the opening scenes? So within the first 5 minutes, obviously James Bond's fighting with that guy in the water and stuff. There's a scene where it just gets like kind of a close-up, and his hair is perfectly fine. Doesn't look wet, doesn't look messy or anything. It's just like perfect. And I'm just like, James Bond can do anything. He can dry his hair so fast too.
Yeah, that's why we all want to be him.
Oh, don't blame him. Don't blame him. How would you describe this story?
Well, there are a couple of things that kind of throw me off as I was trying to think about that, because in the first scene we meet who we learn is going to be the leading lady, Teresa de Vincenzo, played by the great Dame Diana Rigg.
She was a dame in this one.
Just stunning.
Wow.
And then we learn she's maybe suicidal, maybe just has a really rough life, and her dad is some sort of international criminal, but also charmingly Italian, and therefore it's okay.
Yeah, runs a construction company that's well known, and it's kind of hinted by Blofeld, the villain, that his past or what he does is kind of, and of course, obviously, the last 30 minutes you kind of get a glimpse of, this man has got some dealings in the past.
So we learn he has some kind of connection to Spectre, the shadowy underground organization we've been pursuing in the previous movies. So in the same moment, Bond gets that much closer to ending his assignment, and also gets to meet a fascinating new woman in his life. And then her dad begs him to marry his daughter, which is pretty great, I guess. I mean.
Oh man, what she needs is a man to dominate her. That was the quote that he said.
It doesn't need to make any sense. Basically, good old Ernst Stavro Blofeld is posing as some sort of Swiss count, and he's doing it at the same time recruiting lots of young women to go to his allergy research center in the Alps. And while they're getting brainwashed during some sort of psychedelic trance when they have to take pills. And the reason is because they're going to go forth to all the countries that they came from and disseminate a pill that is going to make everyone and everything infertile. Because then there won't be any new births and there won't be any plant life, and everything will die out unless the United Nations agree to pay Blofeld exactly what he wants and clean his criminal record. It's not your usual ransom.
I know. I was thinking the same thing. I'm like, no money, no weapons, no. I just want my record clean, and I'll stop. And you know what? I would think all the nations of the world would be like, fine. Okay.
It's not that big of a demand, really.
Yeah. I kind of wrote that down too, which I was kind of just like, well, that's kind of weird. Just wipe it up. But yeah, that's kind of the whole basis of the story here is James Bond trying to track down Blofeld, and then obviously he goes to Switzerland, and then he fights it off with them trying to stop this biological war. Really, yeah, I thought the ransom was kind of goofy there. I believe this film was filmed in England and Portugal. Was it filmed in Switzerland?
I read that the mountaintop stuff is Switzerland, but then I did read that as well, England and Portugal. I can't figure out what scenes those would have been, but
I think Portugal, like when he went to the
bullfight scene.
Yeah, the bullfight scene. Okay. Yeah, exactly.
Now we're thinking.
Papa, you'll tell him what he wants, or I'll never see you again.
Mr. Bond may have no further interest.
Papa, that's all I kept thinking about there, though.
She's great.
I know, Papa.
She's so great. Between this and The Great Muppet Caper, she's perhaps one of the finest actresses.
I know. I agree. Yeah, interesting choice for a Bond girl. They had some top names for this movie, so this movie wasn't kind of just this underground C-grade project here. It was, they had some top-notch actors here.
Yeah, they went a direction which they almost should have done earlier, which is to get a really respectable actress into the lead part, because it gives her more significance when paired against Bond. And they almost never repeated that either.
Yeah, almost since that time. Yeah, it's kind of been floppy a little bit there.
Well,
oh man, I mean, there's a lot of great things about this movie, and I'll start with the one thing that I noticed from the first time watching it recently. Do you know, outside of the safe, when they had to, obviously, with Bond trying to track down the Count and where he's at, he has to break into the lawyer's room.
Mm-hmm.
So he breaks into the safe, and obviously he has that decoder, which takes like, I don't know, a half hour. He's like sitting there reading Playboy in the newspapers.
Yeah.
And all that stuff. Do you realize that's the only gadget that Bond uses throughout that entire film?
You know, I didn't realize that when you put it that way. It just seems so organic, really.
Yeah.
One thing, I guess, when you were talking about the opening scene, I like that it sets up the fact that this is going to be so much more brutal of a James Bond movie, where it's going to be hand-to-hand combat throughout the entire thing. I mean, whether it's on skis or bobsleds or
oh god, we'll get into that. It always felt like it was a fair fight. You know, he didn't have like watches or a plethora of guns, or his Aston Martin just shooting machine guns and tear gas out. Like, he basically had nothing throughout this whole film.
Yeah, I think that's something I don't think people responded well to in the 60s, but I really like, because we've already seen him wear a jetpack and scuba gear and dress as a ninja and infiltrate an underground volcano mine base. It's nice to have just honest-to-God action fistfights again. It's a nice change. It's like I say, I think it's really brutal. It's really realistic, and it scared audiences away at the time. But I think as the era of action movies in the 70s approached, I think this movie inspired a lot of that.
Yeah, it certainly did, and it's I think that's probably why it scared a lot of people. It was un-James Bond like, no gadgets.
Yeah, down to earth, I guess, is the
very, very down to earth, but also very, I guess you could say 60s too, because obviously we'll get into the mountain-based layer with all the women involved.
Yeah, you're right.
Oh my goodness gracious. He poses as a genealogist too. That's how he breaks into the villain's lair. He poses as a very famous genealogist who goes into the lab, and obviously he's surrounded by soon-to-be the assassins that are being brainwashed, but by a plethora of women who are probably deprived of men, other than seeing, the guards, and that's it. That's a unique way. I don't think I can name any other movie that some spy's like, I'm going to pose as a genealogist, and I'm going to break into the supervillain's lair, and we're going to get them.
There is something wonderfully British about the fact that he has to become an expert in heralds, like family crests and things like that. And then Blofeld catches him because he forgets what city the tomb of the Beauchamps is in, which is great because it's like, aren't you a fraud too?
Did you notice a certain Easter egg in the family crest of the Bonds?
I did, and I should have written down the Latin, but it's "the world is not enough" is the Bond family motto.
I wrote that, and obviously for 30 years into the future, that movie will be released in 1999. The world is not enough. It's the first time I noticed that too. I had never noticed that either. Also, can I also say, with going back to the safe, it's a scanner. Who's a scanner in 1969?
Yes, it was cutting edge stuff.
I know. I was just like, wow, a scanner in 1969. I like it. Probably would have cost a fortune then.
Yeah, so he gets a suitcase. If you haven't seen the movie, you watch it for this alone. He gets a suitcase that's the size of a human being, and opens it up and has to like hook a tube up to the safe, and then it'll spin the tumblers and figure out what the combination is, and it takes like a half hour. It's so beautiful.
Yeah, he just sat there for 30 minutes, just like doing whatever, waiting for this to be decoded. Thank God the Swiss take like hour lunches.
Yeah.
Especially the lawyers. The lawyer probably should have taken a 2-hour lunch.
Yeah, it would only work in Europe, that's for sure.
Yeah, that's true. What did you think of the villains in this, outside of Mr. Blofeld?
Oh, well, are we going to get to him in the future?
Well, if you want to jump into Blofeld now, go ahead.
Well, I guess I want to say that Fräulein Brunt is...
we know where the Austin Powers ripoff came from.
Yeah.
This movie.
This side of Frau Brücher, that's probably not been such a great villainess with a German accent in anything. She was great.
Yeah.
She was great. I mean, she was great. And then I can't remember anybody else's names, but I'm assuming Bruno or Hans or something like that.
Oh, man. I mean, there's not many villains in here. You got your typical guard with a gun, guard 2 with a gun, guard 3 with a gun.
Sure.
But for the most part, it was fine. I can't even think of her name now.
You mean Fräulein Brun?
Yeah.
Did you just want to make me say that?
Yes, I wanted.
I am Fräulein Brun. We will open the presents together. It's more fun this way.
Oh, God.
So I guess we'll jump into Blofeld. I was really struggling. I wrote down pros and cons. I was really forcing myself to come up with things that I didn't like about the movie. And they're all really in relation to where we are in the series, I guess. I wrote down that it was an odd choice to get Telly Savalas as Blofeld so soon after Donald Pleasance in that part.
Yeah, I know. Maybe probably have to look this up sometime in the future, but I don't. Pleasance was great, so maybe he just wasn't available for that film. Maybe they just didn't offer him enough. Maybe they just want to go in a new direction. Either way, Telly Savalas is a great choice for Blofeld.
Yeah. The only thing is his Bronx accent while masquerading as a Swiss noble is a little bit, I don't know.
And Blofeld,
I guess it just makes it that much more fun.
Blofeld is a villain of many talents, Russell.
I guess you're right.
Maybe Swiss is his biggest weakness. He just can't handle it for some reason.
But I guess it's strange because we got established Pleasance in the part, and they made him so small and pale and seemingly weak, I guess I would say.
Yeah, no scar either. Yeah,
they got rid of the scar.
They got rid of the scar, so maybe it's like a different 007, a different Blofeld.
I guess so.
That's just something else. It's great to see in the early films like Blofeld was the constant villain, and that slowly goes away. Now, obviously, we're going to talk about briefly the next film, which
we'll get there.
Yeah, we'll get there.
It is nice having Blofeld as the Professor Moriarty of James Bond, I guess I would say. And the strange thing is that even though they got bored and killed him off, every other villain is still just a clone of Blofeld. So why not just stick with that?
Yeah, exactly. Another thing I do want to, not to jump back and forth with Blofeld here, but I will say with Blofeld, he seems a lot more athletic, a lot more cunning and dangerous in this movie, but that's because we saw him ride a bobsled, ski, throw dynamite.
Yeah, he becomes a physical threat this time around and not as much of a mastermind.
Not much of an intellectual threat, although he still is, but he seems to have the best of both worlds for this film. Can I just... I'm so stunned. How the fuck do these villains always get away with building bases on, mountains and everything like that? The Swiss Alps and the Swiss government's like, hey, he's a count. Go ahead, build it. It's for research. It's for science.
But they haven't even proved that he's a count yet.
Yeah.
You know what I like, though, on that subject? The fact that they actually explain why it's there in the first place. It used to be a sports club, and then it was abandoned, and he took it over for his allergy research.
Yeah. Obviously, I'm wondering what the book says, because I guess Hunt really wanted this movie to be as close to the book as possible.
Yeah, I read that. One of the things I wrote down that troubled me was the Blofeld continuity, because in the movie before, You Only Live Twice, there's definitely a face-to-face meeting between Bond and Blofeld. And in this one, he shows up with a kilt, and somehow they don't know each other anymore.
That's one thing I kind of thought to myself, but at the same time, I thought, if you go back to the first 5 minutes of the film, well, this never happens to the other fella.
Yeah, maybe that's true.
And, it could be, that's the first meeting between that Blofeld and that James Bond, so... I did think about that, though, because I thought, you would think you would recognize James Bond with a kilt. He's not really trying to disguise himself too much. Wow, you put glasses on him and a brown, badass coat.
In series context, it makes no sense at all. But I read that the reason they stuck with it anyway was because in the book they hadn't met each other yet. And they decided to just make it an adaptation of the book and ignore the Connery ones, which is pretty bold for what was the world's biggest movie series at that time.
It is a bold move, but...
Almost like erasing the mistakes of the other ones.
Yeah, could have been. It's just all over the place.
You cannot decide with this movie.
No,
it literally chooses both paths.
Maybe that's the beauty of this movie.
I mean,
a little bit.
Sure.
Yeah, I would agree with that. So there's a lot of the action fight scenes. It's very, very fast paced. Quick take, quick cut. I mean, just fast moving camera action. I think that's just the whole theme of the movie. It's just very fast paced. If we go back to the first 5 minutes of that movie and you see the first fight scene, it's just cutscene after cutscene after cutscene, and just back and forth, just movement. It just feels like you're just constantly running with this movie. I think that's one thing I liked about this movie. The other Bond movies were kind of slow paced a little bit. This movie, it was just fast paced. It was really just like you hit the ground running and just didn't stop.
Yeah, in my struggle to think of negatives, I wrote down that it is a tad long, which you already mentioned. But I don't think it ever slows down either. You're right. And the word that kept coming to my mind was brutal when it comes to the fight scenes, because they're really a departure from the other ones. There's nothing kind of glamorous about the fights anymore like there was
No.
in the previous ones. It's new director, new star. I looked at that as a really nice change from the previous one. It's I think it shows its age in that way, because movies to come would go towards the more realistic, shorter, harder fight scenes, where I think you really feel the pain of the characters. And maybe again that's something that scared people away at the time. It was a little too lifelike.
Yeah.
But I like it for that. I think it's honestly a great action movie.
I agree. I just love, man, just when they get to Switzerland and they're doing like the car chases and everything. It just seems like a lot of fun, because they don't have gadgets, they don't have pretty much guns. It's just kind of outwitting them, and it's a fun time to watch. That whole car derby, the demolition race, that was awesome.
I love that. That's so cool.
I love that. I love the ski chase too. The ski chase is just amazing, and you can tell some of the shots are green screen too a little bit, but I still love it.
Sure.
I love it. He skis on one foot. He fucking skis on one foot. How does any fucking human being ski on one foot down a mountain?
I love that was the solution to the question of how to have an action scene on skis. I have him ski on one foot because he's awesome.
Just ski on one foot down a mountain.
I guess it occurred to me also, because we've been watching a few things like this lately. In the late 60s, were people just obsessed with skiing?
Yes.
Because recently we watched The Fearless Vampire Killers. In
Yeah.
The Pink Panther, there's a huge plot point about skiing.
Skiing.
Downhill Racer is all about skiing.
Mm-hmm.
Where Eagles Dare, they escape on a ski lift and then ski to safety.
I guess
What's going on? Is it suddenly cool?
I guess there was just a bigger, audience for the Winter Olympics or something. And
Must have been.
Must have been. Must have really liked
I just
skiing.
noticed that.
Fuck if I don't know, but it's a good point. But I think the James Bond franchise is the franchise that I can name that they use skiing the most.
You're probably right.
Because there's at least two other movies I could think of with skiing involved in the Bond franchise. So
I wrote down skiing scenes because I think those are awesome. Kinetically, they're entertaining, and they're great action scenes. And then I wrote /winter setting, because you don't get enough action movies that are set on snowy mountaintops.
Agreed.
And yet it's such a great opportunity.
Agreed. Can you imagine how cold he was when he was on top of the transport to the base, where he finally sneaks out and he's standing up there? And I'm just thinking to myself, it's nighttime. You're on high elevation. It's probably negative fucking 40 degrees out there. Where's your jacket,
He's
sir?
just in a sport coat.
He's just got a sports coat. That's it. By the way, how fucking awesome was that death scene of that guy just falling down the mountain?
Oh, dude, that was the most. That's perhaps the best thing in the movie. When this guy falls, it's probably 2 minutes of screen time. It's amazing.
It just falls down, and you get to see it all. And then I'm pretty sure when he finally hits the snow, you kind of see like this little squirt come out, with a little blood on the side. Dude, I loved that so much.
That's maybe one of the best dispatching of a henchman ever.
There's
something so great about that.
Oh man, I loved it. I think it's great. That's a great death scene. He just fell forever.
Yeah,
he just kept falling. Other than that, though, that was the only death where you're like, holy shit.
Yeah, I think that it all ties together. What we were saying, the violence in this movie really reminds you that the people are really in danger. It's not stylish at all like the older ones were. And for some fans, that was too much. For me, I think that was a great direction to go in.
All right, what are your thoughts on the girls at the base? Did you like that theme music, by the way? You
mean when the trumpets essentially spell out the word boner?
Boner!
I have nothing bad to say about it.
Oh man, it was wonderful. It was wonderful. It sneaks out. I guess going back to without being gadgets, he has to be MacGyver, just finding the nail filer or the metal wire and just opening the doors that he's locked in, and fools around with that one girl and then fools around with that other girl. I'll see you at 8. I'll see you at 9. Okay.
He gives them both the same pickup lines. You never get that from any other Bond actor.
No, but it worked. It worked for both of them. Did you pick up any more of the allergic reactions? We had the one girl who was allergic to chicken.
No.
We didn't really get to know any of the other girls outside of the two, maybe a third one at best.
They're there to be treated for their allergies, but it doesn't really matter what they are, I guess.
Yeah, I guess the other one was chicken, and the other one...
I'm guessing hay fever.
Yeah.
Something like that,
yeah.
I don't know, what else is there? Peanuts?
Yeah, if I would have liked to see all the girls just kind of snap into kind of assassin's mode right then and there to try to take out Bond. I mean, Blofeld had a really good opportunity to do that.
Yeah, that's one thing we didn't get that was kind of promised to us, I guess.
I mean, in terms of the girls in general, I think, they did everything that they could with them. It wasn't too much of it. They were only there to kind of serve the plot. They're going to carry out the biological weapon. Bond fools around with them. He gets in trouble and gets found out because of it, too. And they're introduced to him and they kind of fancy all over him. And that's it. That is it. That's the extent of it, and I think that's fine.
Yeah, the idea of James Bond getting foiled because of his problem with promiscuity is actually pretty clever.
Oh man, and his poor partner in crime, although he's just kind of like following him. Man, that guy.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, he gets hung up to dry. Or to freeze. Yeah, he was kind of useless in this movie. I mean,
he was. They shouldn't have given him a partner at all.
He puts the suitcase in the construction thing, going back to when he was working in the lawyer's office, and then he follows him to Switzerland, where the Alps are, and then he hikes up the mountain. He literally hikes up the mountain. He gets caught, and then he gets killed. That's it.
Well, but I mean, the dead hanging body as a intimidation technique is pretty cool.
Yeah, it is pretty cool. But other than that, he was kind of useless.
Yeah, he was worthless. But then a lot of the characters in this are.
So one of your cons there for this movie?
It's not, but I mean, the whole mountaintop base full of beautiful women, what's the point of any of it?
You got to carry out the virus.
Sure, they got to let the virus go, but...
I mean, that's not a bad way. Blofeld's tried everything. Why not try this for once? You got speechless there, sir.
You got me.
Oh, man.
I'm just saying, apart from writing their room numbers down on his thigh, they didn't really accomplish much.
Yeah, I thought she wrote something, the first time I watched this movie, I thought she was writing like 3 numbers on his leg, because it looked like it was a long time. Then it was revealed it was like the most perfect 8 written by lipstick ever. That 8 was perfect.
Well, it's not the first time she's free-handed a lipstick figure on somebody's
probably
thigh.
Not. I was thinking it was like room 162 or something, because it looked like it was forever she was taking it, and all of a sudden room 8. But maybe she was just making it as perfect as possible, graffitiing his leg.
You know, while he was breaking into her room after hours, the other girl broke into his room and waited for him there.
Yeah.
I have more respect for her.
She just didn't care. She just, as the trumpet say, I love the music in this movie, by the way. It's great.
This maybe has the best score of any of them.
Oh, it's so great.
Think of.
It's so great. By the way, small little thing here. Out of all the Bond movies that you've seen, was this the only movie we ever got a chance to see 007's office?
Yes. And it's the only time we get to see inside M's home, where he keeps his butterfly
I also
collection.
wrote that down, and that's probably before, Judi Dench. That's the only time you saw Bernard Lee's, life outside of work, I guess you can say.
He's a lepidopterist.
Yeah. Who knew? Who knew?
Again, people. Again, if there's anything that's more British than being a genealogist, it's being a lepidopterist.
Oh, man.
That's great. And one of the positives I wrote down was more character for the MI6 team.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think even Q, I mean, everybody, M, Moneypenny, and Q, they all get to kind of show some real human side in the movie and not just bark orders at 007 for a change. It was really cool.
Yeah.
You get to see Moneypenny cry at the wedding.
Oh, I'm gonna save that until later.
Sorry.
But no, you're fine. I also found it funny that Q was developing some kind of crazy weapon with lint. Did you get that in the first minute in the movie?
Yes, miniaturization is the way of the future, and he was right.
He certainly was.
Nanotechnology. Q was there.
He was holding his phone right now. Certainly. God, Q was ahead of the game there, and everybody laughed at him.
God bless him.
God bless Q. What did you think about Tracy leaving in a good portion of the movie? She's gone for basically, 90 minutes, maybe a little less than that?
One of the big things that I disliked was the fact that she vanishes while he can go bang some other broads. And
she's gone.
And then comes back to his life like a glowing, angelic figure. I just wish they'd found a way to have her be there for the whole thing.
Yeah, that's kind of one of the things I knocked about it, because I was thinking to myself, okay, watch it again. Let's see how long she's gone. Because, the previous other times, I didn't really think about it. And also, I'm just like, wait a minute. She's gone for like 90 minutes of this movie here. She's the Bond girl. She's kind of like moving the plot along. And she's arguably one of the biggest reasons why he gets to Blofeld. But yeah, she's gone. She's gone. And I find it strange that she just shows up in all the places. Did she even know where he was going? I would say yes.
Well, apparently she found out from Papa.
Papa? Did Papa know where he was going?
I guess?
I mean,
well, he knows Blofeld.
He had a connection to the lawyer, but he didn't know where Blofeld was stationed at or the Count was. But, I mean, well, maybe after reviewing the papers, yeah, probably.
I don't know.
Yeah, it's...
One of the things I wrote down being confused about was exactly what relation does Vincenzo have with Blofeld.
We really
it seems like
don't
kind
know.
of a convenient plot thing.
They might have done some business. Maybe he built... Or no, I mean, the base was already there, so no. I mean, I really... Maybe he built one of Blofeld's previous bases, so it's very possible.
We don't know. It's very murky, but I guess that's the nature of Spectre.
Yeah. You know what I found really cheesy in this movie, by the way, but I kind of liked it at the same time? So in the beginning of the movie where Bond's at the hotel or something, and it changes from day to night, you see a casino in the pool, and the next scene is he's in the casino.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Oh, God, it's hilarious.
Such expert directing.
Oh.
I love that. I love when Tracy gets kidnapped, and he's thinking about her, and he is framed in the window, and then there's an image of her from before in the movie, and she's like in a dream state. She's on the other half of the window. They never took a creative chance like that in any other James Bond movie, and I wish they had.
Agreed. Absolutely agree. Yeah, some of the little things in this movie really make it worthwhile. It really builds up this movie to being what it is, and it's just kind of hard that people just didn't like it back then. And I think, and we'll discuss that later, but I have kind of my other things. Okay, so obviously Bond escapes from the base. Gets out of the base, he skis down the mountain one-legged, gets back to the town, meets up with Tracy, they take off, and they hide in a barn for a night after running out of gas after some fierce storm. Jesus Christ, what a storm. Did you ever, I also questioned this a little bit, how the hell did Blofeld and his men find out they were staying in the barn? And two, how long were they driving in that storm? To get to the barn at some point, because they must have been out of the village, and it's the morning also in Blofeld, and it seemed just find them.
I was almost I felt like screaming at the movie during the scene when the storm is happening and the windshield wipers are going, but then they quit. But they keep driving. It's like you can't see, you're gonna die.
Yeah, well, Tracy did a good job pulling into the barn there.
She did great. It's just that almost made me afraid for their welfare.
Jeez.
I don't know how they found him in the barn unless Blofeld knows every barn in that damn village.
He must. He's got eyes and ears on that. So they eventually escape. Bond does at least. Tracy gets captured after. By the way, Blofeld is awesome in this way too. He sent 3 of his men after them, while the other 3 stayed behind with him. While they were going down the mountain, he takes the flare, shoots it at the top of the mountain to cause an avalanche, saying, "Fuck those guys, you're all expendable." And the avalanche pretty much takes them out completely. They capture Tracy, but they just leave Bond there. Oh, there's no way even 007 could have survived that or something like that. I mean, just you go down there and you shoot him in the head just for safe measures. Villains never take the time. But clearly he found his boot or something to make him kind of convince himself that, he's dead.
There are just not enough snow-based action sequences in things. We need to bring that back.
Yeah. Nothing like a good avalanche, for sure. So Bond goes, back to England, and obviously, he's telling M this, and M's like, no, I have my orders. We can't go in there and destroy the base. And obviously, we know about the ransom from M, obviously. So, he calls Drago, go back to the base, and that's where we kind of figure that, okay, Drago's got some dealings here, because he's got military helicopters. And they break into the base, and they save Tracy, and they blow up the base, but Bond still goes after Blofeld, which comes to probably my favorite part of this whole movie, the bobsled chase.
The bobsled chase and fist fight.
Yeah.
On a moving sled.
It's pretty awesome, and guns are firing. I mean, Blofeld had a grenade that he dropped, and he gets Bond, and Bond kind of slingshots out of the the track, and eventually back on the Blofeld's bobsled. Essentially, the momentum just kind of carried him ahead of him, and then he caught up to him. I love the bobsled chase. It's awesome.
I love that too. That might be one of the best climactic fights, I think, in the series.
And
it's so, like I've said before, it's so real and kinetic and fast-paced. And I think you really feel danger in that scene, especially when he's getting his helmet smacked against the ice.
Against the ice.
Even the stuntman was, he could have been killed.
He could have been.
Very easily.
He could have very well been killed.
You don't screw around with that.
But it's such a great. I love watching that scene every time. It's great, and of course Blofeld. It's just the way this movie is. His head gets stuck in the tree, and that's how he loses. The one thing I screamed about is, you have him stuck here, arrest him!
They can't. He hasn't broken any laws.
Outside of being a mastermind, supervillain, evil criminal.
Yeah.
But yeah,
listen, he was just trying to cure those girls' allergies.
Yeah, I guess he did. Do you think he did?
No.
Oh.
I think he just brainwashed them.
Ah, shit.
Although maybe that's the answer to your chicken allergy. You love chickens.
You love chickens. Did you also notice, by the way, the polar bear taking the picture? Just this crazy, quick 1-second shot of the polar bear taking a picture.
Oh, and I watched it carefully to make sure, because when you see the polar bear, you get this really over-the-top laugh.
Yeah.
And I'm certain that it is the polar bear doing it, because in every shot of him, he's going, like, really making the most of his cameo in that.
It's so, I love that. And also, with this movie, when they go to the base, it's all hands on deck. Everybody's fine. There's scientists throwing acid beakers at people. There are flamethrowers. There's, spikes on the wall. I mean, it's just like all of a sudden the last 25 minutes of this film is just a bomb that goes off, and it's just hardcore heavy metal. Everybody's killing everybody, no holds bar. We get the guns and the grenades to guys getting stabbed with spikes on the wall, to acid throwing, to flamethrowers, to a bobsled chase.
Oh, and I don't want to forget one thing that I wrote down, which is the fist fight in the store full of bells.
This fight in the store full of...
Yeah!
Why can't I not remember this?
So after the... Well, no. It's before the car chase. He gets down the mountain, and before he meets back up with Tracy, he's fighting off the goons, and one of them corners him in a side alley store that's full of nothing but bells. So every punch that gets thrown echoes throughout the place, like clong. It's just the most beautiful thing I could ever think of.
Oh, I forgot about that. Oh my God, Switzerland must be awesome to visit.
A bell shop fight.
A bell shop fight. We got polar bears taking cameras. There's a car demolition derby, car chase scene. The car explodes.
Yeah.
Oh, it's just great.
Everything is just, that's so gloriously off the wall and wild, unexpected, creative. I love every fucking second of this movie. I tried hard to think of negatives, but it's so much fun.
Oh, it's great. It's a great movie, and that leads us to the ending here. The ending's probably the most powerful of any Bond film. And it's
by far.
Casino Royale, the new one. We finally got to see Bond have his moment. A little bit of happiness. Gets married, and you know what? The whole deal was with Drago. He was going to pay him, £1 million to marry his daughter, and he gives him the envelope, and he gives it back to him, and he's pretty much says, "I have everything I need. Don't need it anymore." And they drive off, and they drive away, and he's going to get her some flowers, and then, of course, the car gets shot at. Blofeld fires the gun, and she's dead. And that's it. The movie's over.
Yeah. That's, almost hard to talk about how great that scene is. And great, but difficult to watch. Hard-hitting stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Especially in this franchise of them all. And then the thing I think is really fascinating is that evidently they didn't have a lot of faith in George Lazenby's acting talent, because again, he hadn't done it at all. And so that's why some of it was voiceovered when he's in disguise as Sir Hilary Bray. They use that actor's voice instead.
I didn't notice that.
No,
didn't notice
they're not
that.
different enough for it to be a big deal. But not trusting his acting instincts, and yet in that final scene, he's just so heartbreaking. I mean, absolutely, you feel for the guy. I think they should have just let him go, and I wish he'd become a big movie star because he obviously had the ability to. But yeah, that scene tears your heart right out. I think it's perfect, but it's once again brutal. So yeah, his wife gets murdered, and it's so beautifully shot. You see a round bullet hole in the window, and then sort of vaguely behind it, you get the outline of her face with a little trickle of red on it. Mm-hmm. And then she tips over in his arms, and he holds her to him. And the policeman says, "Are you all right?" And he says, "Yes, everything's fine. We're fine." And he's alluding to the fact that they were going to have a life together. And then they roll the credits. It's like,
yeah, that's it. There's no chasing after Blofeld. There's nothing. That's it. And I like it because typically, I guarantee if this movie came out in the Daniel Craig era, that would have happened, and then he would have went after him, just killed him and done all that, and that's it. But instead, that's it. Shot. It's over. Story's over. Game over. It's over. The movie's over. It's the best ending to a Bond film.
Yeah, by far.
Best ending to a Bond film. Yeah, that's how it ends. You're kind of just like, what the fuck? If it's your first time watching it, and if you're really captivated by this movie, and all of a sudden that happens, you're just like speechless. You're kind of like, what the fuck, dude?
Yeah, well, and again, if you're accustomed to the Sean Connery ones that always end on "This is no time to be rescued" or something like, quippy and clever and upbeat.
I think it's also
have this hit you right in the face.
I think it's also the first Bond film that the Bond girl dies. It might be the first and only one.
Huh.
It might be the first and only one. If you count the new Casino Royale movie, then I guess that's two, but this might be the first one.
Well, yeah.
And it was like that for the longest time. Overall, your thoughts on this movie before we get into its legacy? Like, out of 5, what would you rate it?
I would give it a 5. I absolutely loved it. I guess I can see, especially with the context of history, I can see why it drove people away. Mm-hmm. But I think they were wrong. Honestly, this was a masterpiece, and still one of the absolute best in the series, maybe top 3. Artistically shot, beautifully acted. The script is amazing. All these characters we've come to know from the previous ones, 100 times magnified in terms of who we know they are as a human being. It's just, all of that is great, and the action stuff is just impeccable. I mean, I cannot complain about it. We've been going on and on about how great that is. It's just everything about it is positive. It's just it's a real experience.
Would you rate it in top 5 Bond films of all time?
I definitely would, yeah.
Interesting. I mean, yeah, I have no complaints about this movie. This is one movie that just gets better and better every time I watch it. I always pick up new things here. I definitely give it 4 out of 5 for sure. Again, it gives you everything you want in a James Bond movie. You get to see, and in a new take too, you get to see Bond basically with gloves off, no weapons, law of the jungle basically. See how you can do. You finally get to see his human side for the first time ever. You get to relate to him for maybe the first time ever. Instead of fantasizing to being him, you can actually relate to him for once. And I think that's very captivating of James Bond. I think it's a great movie, and I don't have any complaints about it. And I'm with you. I'd probably rate it in top 5 Bond films. It's certainly the most underrated one of all time.
Oh yeah,
for sure. But I would definitely group it in there with GoldenEye, Goldfinger, You Only Live Twice, Man with Golden Gun, maybe. But yeah, I would probably put it in the top 5.
Yeah,
for sure.
I can't even think where else it would go. It's so perfect.
Yeah, it is, and I would recommend, if anybody who loves James Bond, definitely watch it in order. But I think this is one where if you really love James Bond, you'll like this movie too. It's very, very underrated, and we're going to get into here in a minute.
I would recommend it even go in the other direction, because I've watched some of the other movies with people who make a totally valid complaint that there's this shallowness to the character. And watch this movie and you'll learn that that's not true. But
yeah, if you still feel the same way about James Bond after this movie, then your opinion will never change.
So are we getting into Diamonds Are Forever now?
Sure, why not? Let's get into Diamonds Are Forever really quick.
Because I think that a big part of getting to see that human side of James Bond is what pushed away audiences who are used to the other style. Mm-hmm. And I think they did a way overcorrection with the movie that comes afterwards, which is Diamonds Are Forever. Number one, they got Connery to come back, which, I mean, I do consider him one of the greatest actors. But I wish he hadn't. I wish they had tried to find a way to survive without him.
Yeah, I mean, the movie did financial success. It was the highest grossing film worldwide for 1969. So financially, they were really good. Obviously, Lazenby, he didn't want to, he didn't get along with the producers. He told them that this was going to be his only Bond film. And he also showed up to the premiere with a beard, which they told him, like, no, you got to look James Bond-esque. And he's just like, no, this is my only film. I'll show up to it, but I'm going to just look the way I want to look. That's it. And so there's a lot of tension there. But yeah, going to Diamonds Are Forever, like, there's no mention of Tracy. It's just like, it's like the restart button all over again. Like, oh, that never happened.
Yeah, they not only ignore On Her Majesty's Secret Service, but I think they went so far the other direction of saying, well, people didn't like the serious tone, so we're just gonna completely omit that, and then it became a joke fest. I think all the way throughout the Roger Moore era as a reaction.
I mean, we watched that movie recently, and I will say it's probably the worst of Connery's.
Definitely.
I don't think it's a terrible film. It's certainly a little lengthy at times. There's some parts of it I do like. I think the Bond girl in that one is very boring.
Yes.
I think she's just awful. It's nice to see Blofeld, another actor without the scar in there again. And
hair.
Yeah, and hair. Exactly. Yeah, exactly. But, not going too deep into Diamonds Are Forever. Yeah, it's just like they kind of just hit the reset button. I think they kind of begged Sean Connery to come back just to kind of clean the slate from this. I think, I don't think this movie, from what I've understood, this movie was kind of 50-50. People say he can't act, he was unstylish compared to Connery. This movie, I think that's kind of one of the biggest critics, knock of this movie. And I think the producers were just so mad and fed up with Lazenby that they probably overpaid Connery to come back just to do one more so they could start over again. And obviously after that they found Roger Moore. But yeah, it's just like, it felt like this movie was just shit on all the time. Just everybody was taking a massive dump on it.
It really was. There were too many things at the same time that got changed, and I can see why that would get a negative reaction. But it led to that era when the reaction against it was to make them overly jokey and take away the style of the action that was in this one, which you and I both liked so much. That was more realistic, more fast-paced. And it wasn't until, I'm less familiar with the Dalton ones, but it seems like with GoldenEye, there was that effort to get Pierce Brosnan to play the more vulnerable side of James Bond, the more human side. He gets that scene when he talks about why he kills for a living and things like that. And that was seen as the appropriate way to take the character.
Yeah.
Well, Lazenby started it on that path, and everyone knocked it at the time, and it turned out to be the right thing.
And everyone, I think, in my opinion, has been very harsh on Lazenby, saying he is the weakest Bond. He was in one film. He had one film, and I think he did a fantastic job. I don't think Lazenby is the worst James Bond. I really don't. I don't think he's the worst Bond. He gets shit on all the time because he was in one movie. And he did great, but he was like, no, this isn't for me. He had his 15 minutes of fame. I think that's more than anyone could ever ask.
He really made the most of it.
Mm-hmm. I have noticed that over time, especially a lot of people in Hollywood, they really think this one is one of the best of Bond films. I think over time it's just kind of warmed up, and people start to realize, this one is really good. I think you're right. I think for the time, contemporary time itself, it was crapped on because that's, it was a whole different thing. They were so used to, the Sean Connery James Bond, and then all of a sudden they just switched up, and people are not, they didn't like the change. When change happens to like a certain pop culture icon, I think we kind of get really defensive about it no matter what. And I think that's just one of those moments at that time where people they didn't want it being changed. Now that we look back on it, it was good. It was a good experiment and a good try. It's a shame that they couldn't continue it a little further. The Diamonds Are Forever instead we got Diamonds Are Forever is
garbage.
It is. Is that your worst? Is that your least favorite one? Not counting the Craig movies at all?
I think it's the one that I have the most disappointment in, because if you're gonna bring back the original star, then give us an all-out extravaganza of a movie, not this half-assed.
You didn't like Bambi or Thumper, the two gay guys?
Mr. Wint and Mr. Kid?
Yes.
I don't know if I did or not. They're so bad. You mentioned the Bond girl in that, and they did the same thing with her.
Is it Jill St. John?
It was Jill St. John, yeah. They did the same thing with her. They completely backpedaled with Diana Rigg. You had such a powerhouse performance as the lead, and well, that movie was not a success, so we better make her more of an airhead than ever, because obviously that's what the fans want. And so Diamonds Are Forever set us on that path for such a long time that I wish it had never happened. I don't think it's my least favorite, because probably For Your Eyes Only would be. That was so hard to get through.
Didn't like your maybe we said we were going to get through all of the original ones together one of these days, so we'll have to wait and see. But if it makes you feel any better, Russell, Digital Spy listed this film as the best Bond film to date. The film also became a fan favorite, seeing ultimate success in the home video market. So I guess when it was distributed to the later generations, people were more exposed to it, and they kind of embraced it and loved it. And in September of 2012, it was announced that On Her Majesty's Secret Service had topped a poll of Bond fans run by 007 magazine to determine the greatest Bond film ever. It was voted number 1. Goldfinger came second, with From Russia with Love at third. So,
wow,
yeah, James Bond fans say that this is the best.
Huh. So we've been arguing, and they're on our side anyway.
I still think it's underrated. And for its time, it was crapped on. And you know what? Maybe we just we haven't been talking to the right crowd.
Maybe so.
But, when I talk to a lot of modern-day movie fans and Bond fans, they never mention this movie. I've not once, outside of you, ever heard anyone mention this title once. Ever.
Well, I guess we just need to get the word out.
I guess so. Maybe this is the way to get the word. It's in my top 5. I can't argue against it. It's really, really good.
Yeah, if you're scared that you might not like the 007 films that your boyfriend keeps talking about or something like that because you think they're going to be dumb, I think start with this one.
Yeah, we live in the Daniel Craig era. Not to knock on Mr. Craig there. It's not his fault for the movies that we get today. I also hope they never remake this movie. This movie was one of its kind. Certainly opened the doors to... I think this movie opened the doors to other franchises. Kind of changing the character a little bit.
I do too. I think it gave us, it created the kind of hero who, like you said, for the first time you can relate to him.
Mm-hmm.
And again, when action movie series took off, that was the character that they adopted. Whether it was Dirty Harry or Die Hard or Lethal Weapon,
yeah,
it was always a guy who was hurting somehow and needed to get past that. And maybe George Lazenby started all that.
Yeah, and I hope Mr. Lazenby still cashing in on those royalty checks for this movie. I will say, a few final thoughts here. I do like to see that they haven't excluded Lazenby from anything. They're still in the anthology books. On Her Majesty's Secret Service, the classic VHS tapes of the collections, that was included in there too. Same thing with the DVDs now and everything. So, it's included. And I think at least for the majority of people, when they hear George Lazenby, they still think 007. Because that's probably the only famous role he's did. And who knows, maybe he did a lot of stuff in Australia too. I couldn't tell you that.
I can only hope.
But I thought he did good. And you know what? I would have loved to see Lazenby. What was he signed for? He was signed for, 5 or 6 films? At some point, I think he was signed to a good multi-film deal.
I think he would have been, and then at some point he made it clear that he didn't want it.
Yeah, he made it clear, and I think the producers were kind of just ego-struck. They're just like, are you kidding me? You're playing James Bond, the most desirable man. Actors would kill to get this part. You're just gonna turn it down. They probably didn't take kindly to that.
What a fucking man.
Yeah, I know, right? What a man. That is a man right there. I'm going to play one of the most iconic characters of all time. Yeah, one's good enough for me. I'm done. What do you mean you're done? I said, I'm done.
He's done. He got it right the first time.
Yeah, got it right the first time. I got to respect that. And I know one of these days we're going to watch the Timothy Dalton film, the 2 films he was in, and maybe you'll have a different perspective. Probably not, though, on Mr. Dalton.
I'm willing to give him another chance.
Well, any final thoughts from you?
Yeah. On Her Majesty's Secret Service, definitely top 5 in the series. One of my all-time examples of a Misfit sequel that deserves so much more respect than it got at the time, and continues to be kind of counted out when you need to just give it a shot because it's a spectacular movie.
Diner Rig, you're a big. Keep looking good. We'll see you next time.